proudly present Spyke with your host, Spyke on Chat.
Love you. Bitch, stay on my fridge, I told you. Hey, how's everybody doing today? Welcome to another fun-filled episode of Skype with Spyke. Today, just like every Skype with Spyke, we have an interesting topic and an even more interesting guest. Ever since I was a little boy, I've always loved stories. It's part of the reason why I've gotten into film and TV shows and movies in the first place. Ever since I was a little boy, I've loved stories. And today, we need stories, we need imagination, we need creativity more than we ever have. And today, we have a very special guest who not only does fairy tales and children's stories, but also helps out in the community out there with William VLK and many others. So, we're going to be talking about fairy tales today and helping out the community. So let's welcome our guest, Pinky Bobb! Hey Pinky, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic as always. It's great to have you on Skype with Spyke.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So let's tell everyone a little bit about your background, how you got into doing stories, and so give us a little bit of a background as to what you do.
Okay, well, I write children's book stories. I am actually inspired by my own children and my nieces and nephews and the many wonderful children I get to encounter all the time. They have led me to believe that I want to spread fairy tales to all children, reminding them that regardless of where they come from, who they are, what their background is, every child deserves a happy ending.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
Yes. I'm very proud of what I do. I get to go and interact with some of the most coolest little 5 and 15-year-old kids you'll ever meet, because you're never too old for a fairy tale.
I agree. Sorry, just gonna turn you up a little bit. Okay. So what got you into creating stories in the first place?
I've actually always been a writer. I used to write fables and myths when I was a young kid. And then the older I got, the more I got more into it. And then, believe it or not, my youngest daughter, actually, we started talking about the Tooth Fairy, and it kind of encouraged me to want to write the story of the Tooth Fairy. She said that it had never been told that way, that I needed to tell people these fairy tales that I had come to know often.
I mean, I've seen, like, in different cartoons and in different shows, like, different variations of the Tooth Fairy, but not really a whole lot of detail, you know? Kind of like general bland stories, you know?
Yeah, in my book, the difference between just talking about the Tooth Fairy is this one you actually get to meet the Tooth Fairy. First of all, Tooth Fairies are not their name. That is their job title. That is their job in the fairy world. There are tons of fairies doing wonderful fairy things. The Tooth Fairy is just one of the many fairies there.
Wow.
So this little boy I met, he actually got to meet Kylie, the Tooth Fairy. And she introduced him to the wonderful world of Chaotopia, which is where fairies live, and introduced him to all the wonderful things that a fairy has to do.
Wow, like, that's amazing. Okay, so you've got this book about the Tooth Fairy. What are some of the other books that you have?
Well, I have 7 books in total. My second book is called The Boogeyman is Not a Bad Guy, which everybody always thinks, you know, when they hear the boogeyman, they get kind of scared and grab their pillow a little tighter. But come to find out, he's not actually that scary. In fact, he didn't even know he was being scary. Apparently, he didn't realize that sneaking around little kids' rooms at 3 o'clock in the morning was going to creep him out. We are working on his people skills as we speak, but he's really not a bad guy, and I thought his story needed to be told.
See, that sounds like me. Like, I'm not a bad guy, I'm just a little rough around the edges, you know?
That's right. You're a beautiful misunderstanding. That's what I
See,
tell
exactly. I keep telling y'all out there, okay? Not a bad guy, just a little rough around the edges.
That's right.
Okay, so what are some of the other books that you got?
I have book 3 is The Secret Life of Garden Gnomes, which is a little girl named Elizabeth and her 4 magical garden gnomes. They take her on a wonderful trip all through nowhere, Louisiana, where she gets to discover everything that nature has to offer. I mean, I know kids, y'all don't understand with the iPads and the Xboxes, but nature is a magical place. And she got to go up to the clouds and meet Father Time and Mother Earth and their baby New Year. And she actually got to help box the rain clouds. And one of her favorite adventures that she told me about was the time she met some mermaids. And they explained to her about all the trash. Because when you drop trash down, people don't realize that it just keeps going down until it goes into the ocean. That's where the mermaids live.
Wow.
And so it's covering their world up. And this little girl, she got so upset that this 6-year-old little girl and her motorcycle riding grandfather started a whole campaign, and they raised $10,000 and 1 ton of trash to actually save the mermaids.
Wow.
He actually renamed his whole motorcycle campaign Save the Mermaids. They were a big patch and everything.
Wow. That's really cool. I like how you try to bring some logic and you try to extend the folklore on it. You know, I like that.
I try to give a little bit more insight to not only, the fairy tale itself, but also the actual creature that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So you kind of get to know them on a personal level. And each of the kids that I have in these stories that I've met, they've all had their own little kind of mishap through life. Like poor James from the Boogeyman, he lost his dad in the war. So it was really hard for him to get through some stuff. And by meeting the Boogeyman and going through what he went through, he found himself his own inner hero.
Wow.
So these stories are for all kids of all ages, all generations, no matter who you are or what you're going through. It's to prove that anything's possible if you always believe.
Wow. That's the type of stuff I'm talking about. We need more positive, uplifting stuff like that. You know, we see so much nowadays. There's so much hate and anger and jealousy and greed, and there's all these things in so much of our media and our stories nowadays. And it's like, especially when I was a kid, I loved, and still to this day, I loved Greek mythology.
I absolutely love Greek mythology. I have studied it pretty much most of my life. In fact, I love it so much I actually named one of my first children after one of the Greek mythology characters.
Wow. What did you name him or her?
Andromeda.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yes.
Like, I loved stories like about Hercules and like the 12 labors, you know? I was always fascinated with it. And the different gods and like the different stories, especially like I used to love watching Hercules' Legendary Journeys with Kevin Sorbo. I love the humor, and I love really how they took those classic Greek tales and they wove it into a show. You know, and that was one of my favorite shows all time. And I still watch it to this day occasionally, you know. So
I actually just did a full veg fest yesterday. Me and my daughter watched like 3 seasons of Hercules.
Wow, that's awesome.
That is awesome. We were making fun of the graphics because, back in the day we weren't that great, but it was still a wonderful show. They did a great job doing justice to those stories.
And especially a lot of the props and a lot of the things that they were doing during those times was really ahead of its time.
Oh, it was state of the art. I kept telling her, I was like, this is state of the art. Back then we were all like, oh, wow. But now we're like, oh, well, that's cool. You can't see the stringing, y'all. Good job. But it was amazing. It was ahead of its time, and it was a great take on some of the most classic stories that have been passed down from generation to generation.
Yeah, and I love how they brought in Zeus and Ares and Hermes and like all these different classic characters that, I used to have this book. I used to have a mythology book about this thick. I loaned it to a friend and then he never gave it back, but it literally had mythology from Greek, Roman, Japanese, Irish, like mythology from just about every part of history and like all over the globe. And and it was awesome because it would have the Norse as well, and then it would have like this hierarchy or like this tree in the back of the book that would show you how each of the gods in the different cultures ranked up And I just thought that was fantastic.
Oh yeah, I always found it fascinating, especially the stories of Zeus and his many promiscuous behaviors and his demigod children that he created. I always found those to be some of the most, I'm not gonna lie, I was one of those kids that always kind of hopefully deep inside believed maybe I might possibly be a demigod myself.
I know, right?
You know, I can't breathe underwater and I can't lift up boulders, so my dreams were pretty crushed, but I thought that maybe.
See, that's how I always felt. Like, I always felt like most of my life, like, I was like a son of like a great god or like some great being, and like he just kind of plopped me here and was like, oh, good luck, son. And I'm like, yeah, thanks, Dad, you know.
Yeah, I mean, one of them got an owl for, you know, advice, and a few of them got some rings of protection. I got one. See you later.
So
but you gotta imagine the toys from Mount Olympus had to be the
Yes,
best. Like the sit and spin would bring you all the way up and down, you know, for like 3 days. You'd be spinning.
So another thing I wanted to talk about, change gears a little bit, this organization that you're a part of, Happy Chaos. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how that came about?
Oh, I would love to. Happy Chaos is actually the brainchild of me and my best friend. After we were both diagnosed with some life-altering diseases, we decided if it was going to be our last go-around, we wanted to leave the world a little bit nicer than we found it. So about 5 years ago, we joined together and made Happy Chaos. Because no one can predict the future. At best, it's Happy Chaos. We did wonderful things, like we opened a free store, and believe it or not, it had to get shut down after a year of operation. 6 times it was broken into and robbed and vandalized. I still cannot believe that. But we are in works currently with the Coalition for the Homeless in Senlaw to reopen a free store in Alexandria with C4C. I actually, after meeting Will, he came up with C4C, and Happy Chaos and C4C kind of joined together, and we have done some wonderful community organization events. We've hosted, I would say, at least 4 community events where people
that's awesome.
all over came together, and we would throw a party style where you can meet your neighbors again. I miss that age when you knew who your neighbors were and everybody kind of loved one another, and we actually felt like a real community.
That was one of the things that when I was checking out Happy Chaos on Facebook, which, by the way, I will put that in the description below so that you guys can go and check it out. One of the things that caught my attention about it was the fact of turning those people in your community and in your neighborhood that appear to be strangers and bringing back that sense of neighborhood and that sense of community again. And that was one of the biggest things that like grabbed my attention, and it's like, wow, this is really positive, you know.
One of my favorite things that we started through Happy Chaos, since you said the community, is the little trailer ride. Every year about Halloween, I do a trailer ride for out in my area, and we light it up like a rolling airplane runway. And when we first started, we had 7 kids on it. And this year, I have just now started decorating for it and already have 54 children set to come on to sing Halloween carols and drink hot cocoa and eat cookies and go just hit houses up like they just got bum rushed by a kindergarten class.
That's so positive, because especially nowadays, like you were saying earlier, there's so many kids on their iPods and iPhones, and they're so stuck on that technology. And it's like those type of activities and events, especially when I was a kid, that stuff was exciting, you know? And, and it's bringing some of that stuff that we grew up with and that we grew up doing and trying to bring it back to kids. And I think that's really positive and amazing, you know?
Thank you. I love kids. I love my community. If I'm going to be part of this world, I want to make it as wonderful as possible. And I wanted to bring back some of those old traditions. Like you said, I remember when I was a kid, they had a Christmas display at a neighborhood where we'd walk up and see all the beautiful lights. And at the end of it, I met Santa, and he gave me a candy cane. I want my children and the generations to follow my children to have those very same memories that you can pull back and give you that warm and fuzzy feeling on the bad days.
You know, and it's like me, you know, when I had Will on here, me and him were talking about, especially in our world nowadays, it feels like there's so much darkness, and it feels like so much of the time, like we're losing these positive people and these positive things. And it's like, that's why things like that are so important, because it's reestablishing family values, reestablishing neighbors as friends and part of a community instead of at each other's odds and at each other's throats that happens so much in our world today.
It does, and happy chaos and C4C. Like I said, we've joined together. We have been able to do some wonderful, great things for a very long time, and still now to this day, I'm able to offer free eggs to anyone in my community that might need them through my chicken farm. And we have many other neighbors that offer lots of extra hands and help if anyone in our area needs it. Like I said, we have the free store. I have a listing of every single doctor in the state that does anything from a dental to getting you just a regular checkup for anyone who might not have health care. This way, everyone understands that there really is somebody out there that cares. Mm-hmm. I want the whole community to understand that we are in this together and that we should care about one another, each other's well-being.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. I really would like you to send me one of those books. And what I want to do, I mean, as long as it's okay with you, is especially out here in my neck of the woods, like I'd like to spread the word about your books, you know, especially in my community, you know, and help get people, because especially up here in Michigan, there's a lot of people, and especially there's a lot of people that like to read, and I think it'd be really positive, and I think it would help you out a lot, getting out the word up here, you know, open. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really working with Will to get a lot of you guys from Louisiana, from the Alexandria, Son-Law area, and help give you guys more exposure out here. And I really think that we can do a lot of good that way, you know. I
was always told to think globally and act locally. So exactly. With you wanting to work in your area and me wanting to work in my area, the two are eventually going to meet in the middle, and we have made a huge change all the way through.
Exactly. And it's like, instead of waiting on politicians and all these other people to make the change for us, we need to grab the bull by the horns and make the change ourselves in our own communities every single day.
That's right, and it's very easy to do that. I mean, a lot of people make it like you got to go volunteer your time, or I've got to give so much money. It's not that hard. It really is as simple as holding the door for someone who has their hands too full, telling someone how nice they look, just complimenting your neighbor, or asking them, hey, look, I noticed you don't have your car. Can I give you a ride, or do you mind if I grab you something from the dollar store while I go up there? It's very simple gestures just to bring people back together. But it's time that we start doing these simple gestures to remind each other that we are united as a community and as a wonderful world, a wonderful America.
Now, to finish up our interview today, Pinky, one question I wanted to ask you, and I wanted to just talk a little bit before we wrap things up. As a child, what was your favorite bedtime story growing up?
Oh,
or maybe not even like a bedtime story, but maybe like one of your at least top 3, maybe, or top 5, one of those books that like left an impression on you to this day.
Oh, that would be To Kill a Mockingbird. It was my favorite book and probably the first one I ever fully read. I was in 2nd grade. And I don't know what it was about the characters, the way she wrote the book. I literally felt like I was there. And I could feel their moments and their passion. I could feel my feet were on the pavement with them. And ever since that moment, I had this fire in me to want to be able to give that gift to somebody else, to give them a moment where they were there.
One of my favorite books growing up was, it's kind of hard to narrow it down, but I liked everything from like Goosebump books. I liked Old Yeller. I liked a lot of books with dogs in it.
Where the Red Fern Grows, that was a great one. It's sad at the end, but wonderful. If you haven't read it, go get it.
You know,
I know you have. Anyone that's watching this, if they haven't read it, please, that's a wonderful book.
You know, it was just one of those books that it reminds you of home, it reminds you of family, and especially growing up, I used to love dogs, and I mean, I haven't had a dog in years, but, you know, I still remember those times, and it still brings me back to that place, you know, and especially, I grew up on the west side of the state of Michigan, you know, and we had like 10 acres of land, and it's like you could just go out and wander, and a lot of the stories, or a lot of the scenery in Where the Red Fern Grows really reminded me of back home.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you very much for joining us today, Pinky. It's been wonderful having you. I'm going to put, like I said, I'm going to put the link in the description below for all her books and for Happy Chaos. You guys can go and check out all her books. Also, Happy Chaos, lend them a hand, help them out, support them. Thank you so much again, Pinky.
Thank you.
And it was wonderful having you. And
it was wonderful to be on.
And to everyone else, thank you so much for joining me on Skype today, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.